2023 is upon us, and now it's time for me to predict who's going to be champion by the end of the year. I'm going to be doing this by talking about each champion and the matchups that they'll probably be having this year, how many times they'll be competing, and how stylistically some of these people will be able to beat them. I'll also be talking about if there's multiple title changes as well. Now let's get on to the video. Starting off with the women's atomweight division, the current champion is Angela Lee. I think she's going to start off her year in probably the first 3 to 4 months defending her title against Siho Ham. I think that's going to be a relatively easy title defense for her. I don't think Ham is going to be able to deal with Angela's wrestling that well, and I don't think she offers up enough of a striking dangers to be any risk there. So I think Angela's going to go by that pretty easily. Then it's going to be Tiffany Teo. And I think that Tiffany Teo is going to beat Angela Lee to win the title sometime in the summer, just because I think stylistically Teo is a nightmare for her. On the feet, Teo is an excellent boxer, and she's going to be able to outbox Angela for most of the contest. Tiffany is roughly Angela's size, so Angela won't be able to tower over her like she does most of her other opponents. When it comes to the wrestling, Tiffany was able to scramble with Michelle Nicolini, a strawweight and 80cc champion, and she was actually able to out-scramble Nicolini at some spots. So the grappling of Angela is not even going to be that much of a problem. And the cardio of Tiffany is absolutely exceptional. I mean, her best rounds against Zhang Jingnan in the rematch were the 4th and the 5th round. So even then, Angela Lee is going to have a very tough time there. She's going to be constantly moving forward with her boxing combinations and defending those takedowns. I think that she'll probably win via a decision, but I could see her getting it finished in the later rounds via strike. If Angela maybe is a little bit too anxious to get the takedown, doesn't set it up well, I could see Tiffany maybe getting a submission there. And then finally, for the rest of the year, I would say that probably the winner of Denise and Stamp would fight for the title, and I think that Tiffany would easily win that fight with her offensive wrestling. And even then, the boxing of hers would actually be very interesting to see against Stamp. So Tiffany would be the women's atomweight champion by the end of 2023. After that, in women's strawweight, the current champion is Zhang Jingnan. And I think her first title defense will be against Diana Cardosa. I think that Cardosa is going to be a relatively simple challenge for Zhang Jingnan. Cardosa has a lot of just looping power shots that she doesn't set up very well. Zhang should be able to use her straight shots and boxing skills to outmatch Cardosa. I think that Zhang Jingnan will probably get a finish in the 3rd or 4th rounds. And then after that, I'm going to guess that Zhang Jingnan will defend her title against Meng Bo. And that one is going to be a really interesting contest to watch because Meng Bo has solid boxing technique, but the thing that really makes her different is the power. I think that she does have one-punch knockout power in those hands, and I think that Zhang Jingnan has not faced someone with the same power that Mo Beng has. Something that makes it especially dangerous for Zhang Jingnan is the fact that sometimes Zhang Jingnan decides to just keeps her hands just a tad low, and it's going to be very dangerous for her. But with that being said, I still would lean Zhang Jingnan there because I do think that her cardio get better. She has the ability to bounce back a lot better, and I think her fight IQ should be better than Meng Bo. She might even be able to use some of her wrestling to take down Meng Bo and use some submissions there. So the champion at the end of 2023 for women's strawweight would be Zhang Jingnan. We move into the heavyweight division, where the current champion is Arjun Boulard. But I believe that everybody knows who the real champion is. It's Anatoly Molenkai. And I think that by the end of the year, he'll probably be the champion as well. If he does fight Arjun, it's a stylistic nightmare for Arjun. Arjun's wrestling is going to be negated by Anatoly's. Anatoly is constantly going to be marching him down and looping power shots at him. Arjun does not have much of a power threat to Anatoly, and I believe that Anatoly is going to be able to knock him out in the early rounds. As for any other contenders in the division, I would say that really it's only Kang Ji-won for having just knockout power as well, but that's going to be pretty risky. It's going to be like 50-50, and even then Anatoly has the wrestling to back him up. And maybe Marcus Almeida. I'm not sure how Marcus Almeida is going to do with a strong pressure wrestler with very heavy hands. So unless someone new comes in or someone like Almeida shows really good promise, I think that Anatoly is going to end the year as the heavyweight champion of the world. For the light heavyweight division, the current vision is Anatoly, but there's not a whole lot that can be said. There's no active fighters there, and I believe that Anatoly would just beat anybody in that weight class. So Anatoly will likely end the year as the light heavyweight champion, unless one signs an absolute killer for him to fight. Going into the middleweight division, Renier de Ridder just suffered a nasty knockout loss that is potentially career-changing. I won't assume that we're going to see him fight in the first 4 to 5 months of the year. And when he does, I think that he'll probably fight maybe like the winner of maybe Vitaly Bigdash and Daniel Zainalov. That would be a good title eliminator there. And for that fight, it's going to be really dependent on how RDR comes back, because something like that would really change him, I believe. I think that the same guy who saw rushing into there, like aggressively trying to throw people to the ground, I think you're going to see a more tentative RDR, and once you see that, I think you're going to see him lose a lot more. I think that Bigdash is the toughest fight for him. Bigdash on the feet can give RDR a lot of problems with his kicks. He's got a lot of power in his hands, he's got a good chin, and even his offensive and defensive wrestling can give RDR a lot of problems. So my tentative guess is I'm going to say Bigdash would actually win that fight via maybe a third round TKO. As for the rest of the year, it's kind of hard to tell, but maybe they would do an Ungla quadrilogy or something like that. I think Bigdash, though, beats everybody else in the division currently. So for the end of 2023, my prediction is Bigdash will be the middleweight champion of the world. The current welterweight champion is Christian Lee, and I believe after he settles his business with Sajid in March, he'll probably defend the welterweight title sometime in the summer. And whoever challenges him will probably be the winner of the Solidage-Ramazanov rematch. And in that fight, it's going to be very close. I might lean Ramazanov because of his wrestling. And then when it comes to Ramazanov versus Lee, I think that Ramazanov probably beats Lee, because Ramazanov is bigger, he's stronger, and mainly the wrestling is going to be a hard time for Lee to handle. I think that just being constantly forced to wrestle for 5 rounds is going to really drain Lee's gas tank. And we saw in Ramazanov's fight with Sebastian Castan, he can wrestle for a full 15 minutes and have no problems at all. Meanwhile, Christian Lee was looking pretty gassed after that first 10 minutes with Cameron Abasov. And though Lee did manage to win that fight, it's going to be different knowing that someone has a much better gas tank than. After all, Ramazanov was able to hold down Sebastian Castan, who is a much stronger and more powerful striker than Lee was. Even though Lee does have solid credentials in grappling, I don't think that's going to be able to do much against a Dagestani wrestler like Ramazanov. So I think Ramazanov beats Lee. And then as for who he fights next, it's going to be hard because Ramazanov has already actually beaten most of the guys. Hiroki's on a 2-fight win streak, and he just lost to Ramazanov a couple years ago. Sebastian just lost to him. So it's probably either going to be Volmir Da Silva, who just got knocked out by Sebastian Castan, or Sexyama, who's 46 and coming off of a win at lightweight. Which means that the most viable contender would probably be Ruslan. And in that fight, I would very much favor Murad because he's much bigger than Ruslan, and I think his wrestling is a lot higher class than whatever they give him. I'm guessing Ramazanov is probably going to beat them as well. So for the welterweight champion at the end of the year in 2023, I'm going to go with Murad Ramazanov. The lightweight champion is Christian Lee, and I assume that he'll make his first defense in the first 3 to 4 months of the year against Sajid Isagabmayev. That fight's going to be really interesting to watch. I think stylistically it's very fascinating. I do think that it's going to be similar to a potential match with Murad Ramazanov, wherein Sajid's wrestling will probably be too much for him. In fact, I think Sajid is actually bigger than Ramazanov. If you look at pictures between the two, Sajid's actually slightly taller than him. I think he's also even stronger than him, which is just amazing that Sajid's somehow able to make lightweight. But something that separates Sajid from Murad is that I think Sajid's a lot better at striking. You saw that in that Shinya fight, and I think Sajid's a lot better in his pressure as well, and that's both going to give problems to Christian, because he's going to be able to push Christian back a lot more than maybe Murad would, and I think on the feet he's not going to be as uncomfortable as Murad would be. But besides that, I think the matchups would be very similar in that Sajid's just going to be able to force Christian to wrestle with him and drain the gas tank over time. So I would think that Sajid would win that fight via a late submission, maybe 3rd to 4th round. After that, I would think he would fight the winner of Dagi Asalaniev versus Hali Amir. That's a good title fight eliminator. Let's assume that Dagi wins that fight. I think it's going to be really dependent on how good Dagi's takedown defense is, because his wrestling has been proven to be pretty solid, but he hasn't faced someone as near the level that Sajid Isagabmayev was. So I think Sajid would probably win that fight as well, but though I think that would actually be a tougher fight for him than the Christian fight. And maybe Sajid could squeeze in a title defense against Oak or somebody else just to get another one under his belt for this year. But by the end of 2023, I believe that Sajid Isagabmayev will be the lightweight champion of the world. Moving on to featherweight, there's Tang Kai as the current champion, and I believe he'll probably defend his title against Ilya Freemanov first and during the first 3 to 4 months of the year. That fight's actually really good. Both of those guys are excellent strikers. Ilya Freemanov, I think, is a little bit more technical in his ability. He sets up his shots a little bit more, but I think Tang Kai is a lot faster and carries a lot more power behind him. It would be a very good fight, and I can't wait for that one. But I would lean for Tang Kai there just because I think the power might be a difference. After that, he would probably fight Shamil Gasanov. And I'm going to be honest, I think Shamil Gasanov would probably win that one. Maybe, a lot of people would probably think that I might have a Russian bias because of how many Russians have been picking in this video thus far. But I just think that the sambo that Shamil has would be enough to overcome Tang Kai's takedown defense. I think enough on the feet to carry himself into the takedown. Tang Kai is going to be forced on the ground with Shamil. He's just going to be completely out of his league. I mean, you saw what he did to Kim, and Kim is a pretty big featherweight at that. So I would say that Shamil probably gets that fight within the first 3 rounds via submission. And even if he's not able to finish the fight, just the grinding style that he has would just be very difficult for Tang Kai to deal with. Tang Kai has not really faced someone with the sambo skills that Shamil has and just the overall speed and takedown attacks and offensive wrestling that Shamil has. So by the end of the year, I believe Shamil Gasanov will be the 1 featherweight champion of the world. For the bantamweight division, there currently is no champion, but the vacant title fight has already been booked for February between Andrade and Lineker in their rematch. Based off of how the first fight was going, I'm going to lean Andrade there just because he's a much better technical striker. I think he's just going to wear Lineker apart. But Lineker does have the X factor of the power. After Andrade claims the title, he'll probably fight Stefan Lohman in the first title defense sometime in the summer. And I believe that Lohman will probably beat Andrade with his offensive wrestling. Not to mention on the feet, Lohman's blitzing combination work is going to be enough to deal with Andrade's overall stand-up. And then by the end of the year, Lohman's probably going to fight maybe Kwon Won-il or Shuya Kamakubo. Both Shuya Kamakubo and Kwon Won-il are fights that very much favor Stefan Lohman because his style just works very well against those two. Right now, I don't think anybody beats Stefan Lohman at bantamweight. His striking is very strong, and his offensive wrestling is excellent as well. So by the end of 2023, I believe that Stefan Lohman will be the bantamweight champion of the world. Current flyweight champion is Demetrius Johnson, and he'll be defending his title sometime in May at the U.S. debut of One Championship against Adriano Moraes. That fight's always going to be tough for DJ. Adriano is such a big threat on the feet and on the ground, and if Adriano makes the proper adjustments, I could see him possibly beating DJ. But I believe that DJ has a lot better fight IQ and experience, so I'll lean with him retaining his title against Adriano there. Defend his title later that year against Akhmetov, maybe in December. I think that's a fight that's going to be comparatively a lot easier for him. Akhmetov does have very good wrestling. DJ has fought similar wrestlers in terms of style, and I believe that Akhmetov does not have the same power and striking dangers that Moraes would have. So I think that DJ would probably win that fight as well. So by the end of 2023, I believe that Demetrius Johnson will still be the flyweight champion of the world. Finally, there's the strawweight division, where the current champion is Jared Brooks. Brooks just won the title off of Joshua Pacquiao, and I imagine his first defense would be against Gustavo Blart. Blart doesn't present too much of a threat on the feet. The pace and boxing that Brooks has is going to be too much for Gustavo Blart. There's also the option of Jeremy Miato, and Miato would be an interesting challenge as he's big for the division, has solid wrestling, and is very dangerous on the feet. But at the same time, I also think that he's never really faced an offensive wrestler on the level of Jared Brooks. There's also the possibility of a Pacquiao rematch, and the first fight was pretty close. If Pacquiao makes the right adjustments, I could see him maybe even winning that fight. But I'm still going to lean with Brooks there because I think he's also improving a lot as well, and he can probably beat Pacquiao again. At the end of 2023, I think that Jared Brooks will still be the 1 strawweight champion of the world. That's my video, guys. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and please leave your comment about who you believe will be the champion at the end of 2023. This is Shire TV Productions, and I'm out.